Miami holds on for a big Saturday night victory over the Utah Jazz, and we look ahead to Miami's week with a voice from the great beyond.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However you may be listening, YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is Wes Goldberg. We've got a great show for you today. A big win for the Miami Heat over the Utah Jazz on Saturday. I was there at that game. It was an exciting atmosphere at FTX Arena. Plus, we'll look ahead to a couple things that are taking place this week, and we'll get a new segment rolling that we'll talk about later on. It's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to be a mainstay of this show. But Wes, how was your weekend?
Good. I was not at the game against the Jazz. Would have been nice. Had family in town though. We had a nice Italian dinner Saturday night. Saw my brother. Came down from Orlando. It was a nice weekend overall. But even an even better one that the Heat got a huge win over the Jazz. Maybe, I mean, just another signature win on a season that you've already kind of accumulated a few of these.
It was a great sports weekend. Like, I love these weekends.
Yeah.
When I used to really love all South Florida sports, a Canes victory, a Dolphins victory, a Panthers win, and of course the Heat win. And that was, as you mentioned, a big game, a signature game. And I think what the exciting part of that was that Miami just controlled the pace of the game for most of it. It was a back and forth affair for about three quarters. Miami started pulling away there late in the game, and then they were actually up 112-93. And then the Utah Jazz went on a 20-3 run to keep things close. They actually got down within one at one point late in the game, but Jimmy Butler sealed the game with some free throws. Donovan Mitchell wound up taking a bad shot as time expired, and Miami was able to hold on to the win. For me, the takeaway from the game, the central takeaway of that was that after Thursday's blowout loss to the Boston Celtics, Miami needed to find a way to respond, and they did so in convincing fashion. We have talked about this all season, that this is a very different version of the Miami Heat than what we've seen in the past, where they've given up leads or where they've blown games, where they don't know how to, how to hold on to a victory. This was a team that figured it out. They were able to understand the challenge. And look, the Jazz are a really, really good team, and Miami was still able to take care of business.
They've done this now a few times this season. There's just a resiliency that this group has, and I think you start with Eric Spoelstra, who I think we don't appreciate the fact that he is the second longest tenured coach in the NBA right now, outside of Greg Popovich, right? Like, there's a stability there that matters. I think that he puts a belief in his team. I think it starts with him, and then of course you've got Jimmy Butler and you've got Kyle Lowry, and I just think that the way they play, they're just so confident, not just within their own abilities, right? Jimmy Butler, I don't need to take threes to make a difference from scoring. I can lock anybody up in the league. Kyle Lowry, same thing. I don't need to score 20, 30 points a game to make a difference. But just their unselfishness with everybody else also just imbues confidence in all their teammates, right? Because they are the star players. Jimmy Butler specifically is the star player, right? The one guy on this team that probably right now is considered one of the top 15 players in the NBA. And yet, unlike a lot of those people in that group, his peers, he doesn't need the ball in these last minutes, right? He's happy to give it up to Tyler Herro, coming off the bench, right? Happy to get Bam Adebayo involved, happy to just let Kyle Lowry go off for his if he's got it rolling and he's going for a triple double. I just think that this is a team that is very opportunistic. It's a word I keep going back to describe this team. But also I think very, very resilient is what we're seeing, especially off of a tough loss to Boston, right? To be able to bounce back and beat Utah at home.
Yeah. That's their identity, right? I think this season they've had enough championship pedigree on this roster, guys that have seen it all. They know that it's a tough loss. They kind of wrote it off after Thursday, and they said, you know what, it's just one game. But at the same time, they understood what's at stake here. They want to continue to build in the positive direction, and on Saturday, they absolutely did that. And a big part of that was a player who was listed as questionable before tip-off. We didn't know what to expect after Kyle Lowry suffered an ankle injury on Thursday's loss, where he was, he actually went to the locker room I think it was midway through the third quarter, didn't come back at all for that game. And of course, Miami wound up losing badly, but we had no idea what was going to happen. We had no updates until Saturday. We heard from Eric Spoelstra that he was warming up with an intention to play. As we've talked about before, ankle injuries can be somewhat tricky. Spo kind of dismissed it and said, Lowry, he's a player who has gone through this number of times. He understands what's at stake here. He always responds positively to treatment. And he did on Saturday. Again, from going from questionable to a triple-double, I think the 19th of his career and the fourth oldest player to achieve a triple-double with 20 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists. So an overall fantastic game from Lowry. He was everywhere, making the right play, looking ahead to, cutters, just putting everybody in a great position to score and working so synergistically with everybody on this roster.
The triple-double is great, isn't it, David? But to me, just the fact that he looks healthy, that he is able to threaten for a triple-double in the first place, that he was able to be in the game at the end of that thing, despite, we talked about the ankle, it just didn't look good. On one hand, him hopping off right to the locker room is not a good sign. On the other hand, at least he was doing it under his own power, right? And he wasn't crumpled on the floor for minutes and then didn't have to, help him off. But there's also the wrist thing. And you and I talked for Friday's episode about after that Celtics loss, maybe you just rest him for a little while. Maybe you just give him the weekend off and you just hope he's ready to go for this road trip. That's going to be really difficult coming up. But that's not how Kyle Lowry operates, I suppose. He's like, hey, if I can go, I'm going to go. Even this earlier in the season, I think you and I said, just don't, I'm sure you can go, Kyle Lowry. I'm sure if it's a playoff situation or a playoff push, get out there late in the season. But right now, just take a breather. We were talking about Gabe Vincent. Do you put Tyler Herro in the starting lineup? Do you have to go out and make some sort of acquisitions? Do they have point guard depth issues? Turns out that the entire conversation was meaningless, at least for the short term, at least for right now, because Kyle Lowry was able to go out there and have his best game of the season as a Miami Heat player.
Yeah, fantastic. But, Jimmy Butler was also really impressive on Saturday night. 27 points, really efficient. Didn't seem like Utah had an answer from whoever. He was always hunting for mismatches, always seemed to find whenever a smaller player, if they switched Conley onto him or even a guy like Mitchell, he just responded to the challenge. A couple times where he tried to post up Mitchell, took a couple of turnaround jumpers on Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, whoever it was, all comers. Jimmy took them all on and he was able to handle them. A fantastic night for him. Really efficient scoring, getting to the line too, but not relying on it. The big difference between him and, say, a player like James Harden, and impactful down the stretch too, coming up big, hitting some nice free throws in clutch situations. But I did want to talk a little bit before we move on. Go ahead.
I want to ask you though, Jimmy Butler, 27 points, 11 for 15 shooting, didn't take a single 3-pointer. What have you thought about his offense overall this season? Because it's been talked about. We kind of mention it. Hey, another good scoring night for Jimmy Butler, but I feel like we're so involved in Kyle Lowry pushing the tempo, Bam Adebayo's sort of new role, Tyler Herro coming off. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Jimmy Butler's offense. He's the leading scorer on this team. What have you thought about his offense so far?
It's great. I have concerns about its sustainability. I know we saw what happened last year against the Bucks when they were basically able to just shut down Jimmy completely. Now, I know a player like Kyle certainly takes another element here, but Jimmy just looks much more efficient than I remember him, even being last year. He was putting up some monster numbers last year, but I think he's been very good this year. I still have concerns about whether or not a bigger body can shut it down. But last night, this was the segue I wanted to make before, is that they took Rudy Gobert, one of the best defenders, a two-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, and they took him out of the game completely, rendered him completely neutralized. And a big part of that was because of Bam and the mid-range shooting. So it just frees up opportunities for a guy like Jimmy to work close to the basket, especially if you don't have a defender like Gobert anywhere near him. So I don't know.
It's really rare when Rudy Gobert is a -20 in the plus minus, right? I don't know that that's ever happened. Maybe outside of a playoff game.
Yeah, I was sitting next to David Locke, the Jazz, obviously, radio play-by-play man, and let me tell you, they were not happy with Rudy's performance whatsoever. It was possibly one of his worst games over the last couple of seasons, and they've seen some clunkers from him, but just Bam was completely effective. And a big part of that was the mid-range shot. 4 of 7 field goal attempts from the mid-range. Really, really good. Just looked confident. Looked like he just had his stroke on. Understood that what was at stake here. Again, that seems like it's a recurring theme. But Bam just understood, look, this is Gobert. I've had problems with him in the past. He has not played well against Rudy throughout his career. He hasn't played well against even Hassan Whiteside. And I think Hassan was actually more effective than Gobert was in limiting Adebayo. But, we've seen him go
again, once in a blue moon kind of a thing that's happening. But you're right. I think, David Locke, I'm sure, was screaming at the top of his lungs as he does. And if you haven't listened to people listening, even if you're not a Jazz fan, like go on to like League Pass. They have the radio broadcasts available. Just listen to David Locke do like one play-by-play. It's like a spiritual experience. It's there's nothing like it. Anyway, but yeah, you got to give credit. Like obviously, you blame Gobert and the Jazz for that performance, but you have to give a lot of credit to Miami too. And it's a weird match. That was a weird matchup for Utah. Good matchup, I thought, for Miami, because what Utah's defense is going to do is take away everything at the rim and take away and chase everybody off the 3-point line and funnel everything to Gobert. That's Miami's like, great, cool, that's awesome. We don't even care about 3-pointers. We're taking fewer of them this year than we were last year. But we're gonna carve you up in the mid range if you're gonna give this to us over and over and over again. And that's what Utah's defense is designed to do. And in a lot of ways, what Miami's offense is designed to exploit. Right. And I just going back to the Jimmy Butler point, and you can kind of extrapolate this across this entire lineup. That's the kind of stuff that works in the playoffs, right? Like you want to be able to feast in that mid-range area. And that's just the one thing I keep going back to with them. That offensively, they're not going to be the top offense in the league, but if they could stay in the top 10, I think that they're going to be very good. They're going to have a good seed. And then once you're in the playoffs, that basketball really starts to matter a little bit more than it does in the regular season.
Did you get a sense that Miami got lucky that Utah has Donovan Mitchell on that roster? Because as good as Mitchell was, 4 of 15 from 3-point range. And I tweeted right before the play actually rolled out, they're going to go to Mitchell. It was obvious they shouldn't, because he wound up taking a really, really bad shot as time wound up. But it just, he cost him the game to a large part. I know he kept him in the game, but the ball is so, well, he's not much of a sharer when it comes to playing basketball. And it's, you got to live or die by a performance from Donovan like that. Did Miami get lucky?
No, I just thought that they shut everybody else down. Like, it's not often that Jordan Clarkson comes off the bench and just is rendered completely useless. Minus 27 in the box score. He's been struggling offensively, and defensively it just doesn't give you much. In Miami, this is what I keep saying. I keep going back to this word, opportunistic. And it's just they have transformed themselves from last year to this year. They're a mismatch hunting team. And they did that because that's exactly what Milwaukee did to them in the playoffs last year. And they got swept by it. And they said, you know what? We need more of that in our diet. And so they went out and they are a very different team this year offensively, not just because of Lowry, but because Bam is playing different. Jimmy Butler is freed up now off the ball a little bit more. They're hunting these mismatches. And when you put a guy like Jordan Clarkson out there, they're going to say, you know what? Thank you very much. Nom, nom, nom. I'm going to take care of that. And then Rudy Gobert, same thing. Like, hey, we'll dare you to come out and challenge us in the mid-range. We're not going to let you just hang out and French rejection us this entire time. Like, that's just not what we're going to let you do. And then offensively, everybody else, I mean, they weren't getting much from Ingles. They weren't getting much from Conley. No. Like, they weren't getting much from anywhere. Like, Donovan Mitchell, he had, like, that's a classic high usage scoring guard type of game. 14 for 28 isn't terrible. I know that he wasn't awesome down the stretch, but they needed his 37 points because they weren't getting points anywhere else.
Quick thoughts on Hassan Whiteside? Anything? I mean, look, he was booed every time he touched the ball. He spoke kind of positively about the Miami experience, and very surprisingly, so did Eric Spoelstra. Kind of felt a little bit like pulling teeth when they asked him about, I think it was a Jazz reporter asked Spoelstra about Whiteside's moodiness and impacting his play, and Spoelstra kind of just grinned and just delivered a very, very nice, solid answer without really, very, very much so.
This is how you know he's one of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA, is because he's that much of a politician. You know what? I understand booing Whiteside. I get it. He left. He was griping when he left. The whole I got shooters now. We got shooters. It's just like, yeah, man. You know what? You didn't have to burn bridges on your way out. You got traded. Like, deal with it. Like, the Heat helped. They gave you your first big contract, and he earned that contract, no doubt about it. But now it feels like it's been a few years. Bygones are bygones, and everybody's like, you know what? That's just not even interesting to talk about anymore. So that's all there is to it. But fans are still going to boo, and that's great. That's what fans are for.
And let's hope you won't boo our next segment when Nostradumbwes introduces us to his visions of the great beyond, from the great beyond, about this upcoming week from the Miami Heat. But first, a little bit about Prize Picks. If you're an NBA fanatic, you've probably heard about Prize Picks. It's a daily fantasy made easy for you. They've got the best NBA DFS prop game on the market, offering more NBA props than anywhere else. And they offer all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. All of your users that deposit and use your promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Just be sure to use the promo code NBA. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected numbers. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com and use the promo code NBA, or go to your App Store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Speaking of making things easy, what you need is DirecTV. Simple way to get all the entertainment that you love without the hassle. DirecTV brings you your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports movies and shows all in one place. And the best part, there's no annual contract, so stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com.
All right, it is time for Nostradumbwes, David. This is a new segment that we're doing. This is unflappable predictions of the future, the next week of Miami Heat basketball. So what I'm going to do here every week on Mondays is give you a handful of predictions for the week of Miami Heat basketball on a Monday, and then on a Friday, what we're going to do is look back and just see how right I was. And that's what we're going to do here on Locked On Heat. And so I got my first prediction for you now. David, are you ready?
Absolutely. And let me say, I love the wardrobe change. Really big. I mean, it just perfectly sums it up. I love it.
If you're going to do it, you got to do it big. If you're not watching on YouTube, that's your loss.
That's right.
Subscribe on YouTube. All right, so here is our first prediction. The Heat will lose to the Nuggets, but Jimmy Butler will score his season high in points. His season high so far is 36. I love this matchup for Jimmy. Michael Porter Jr. has been struggling offensively. His confidence is a little bit shaken. He missed a wide open layup that could have won the Nuggets the game the other night. And defensively, there's always just been room for improvement for MPJ there. So whether or not he's there, I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, and if he's not there, even better for Jimmy Butler. You don't even at least have that like 6'8" body in his runway. I think Jimmy Butler is going to go off. I think he's going to eat, but I do think that on the first game of a long road trip, Miami will lose to Denver, but Jimmy Butler is going to put up a hell of a performance. Your thoughts?
I like the Butler prediction. I don't like the thoughts of them going in there into Denver and losing. They're building momentum here. They came back, they held on to the win over the Jazz. They beat the Nets. They've beaten the Bucks. I know some of those games were missing key players on the other side of the ball, but this is a Miami team that's different. Why would they go into Denver and lose this game? I have to completely disagree with you, Nostradumbwes. I'm sorry. I know that you can see more than the average human being, but at the same time, there's got to be some way for Miami to go to Denver and find a way to win.
Don't doubt what I'm seeing, David. That's the whole point. I can tell the future when I'm wearing this hat, all right? Let's move on to my second prediction. I'm looking. Okay. Wednesday night in Los Angeles. First night of a back-to-back set at Staples Center. First the Lakers, then the Clippers on Thursday. Let's talk about this matchup in general. I'm not going to tell you who wins because I don't want to ruin the suspense, who wins these games. But I will tell you this, David. Duncan Robinson is going to break out of his shooting slump from three-point range in LA at Staples Center. Duncan Robinson is going to erupt from three-point range. I'm telling you this. I can see it. I can see it now. The Lakers, the Clippers rank 9th and 10th in the most three-point attempts or three-point makes allowed by opponents. So that's very not good for them. And I think it's just a ripe setting for a guy like Duncan Robinson to walk in and take advantage of some iffy perimeter defense by both the Lakers and the Clippers, get his three-point shooting season back on track. Your thoughts?
Listen, I like where you're going with this. I think that's exactly the kind of prediction a lot of our fans can get behind. These teams not particularly good defensively right now. The Lakers in particular have had some questionable roster moves. There's not a lot going on there as far as their defensive presence, and of course they're going to be missing LeBron James as well. I like it. I could see Jimmy having a big game against the Lakers as well, but you're right about Duncan Robinson finally breaking out. I think it's going to happen. I know a lot of Heat fans have been clamoring for him to finally have a big game. It's okay. It's not that big a deal. I think we're all needlessly concerned about nothing. But you know what? It's all going to be answered if he winds up having a big game against the Lakers. Now, is this a big game? Nostradamus, is this a big game against the Lakers and Clippers, or just against the Lakers?
Both. It's happening against the Stats. What I'm saying, both of these teams rank in the bottom 10 in the league in three-point makes allowed. This and Duncan Robinson's entire job for Miami is to make three-pointers. He has not been doing a great job of this season so far. my confidence in him has never been shaken because I've been seeing this for a while now, David. I know this is only the first time we're doing this segment, but I've had this hat now for a couple of weeks, and it works. So I have foresaw the Duncan Robinson explosion in Los Angeles. It is going to happen. It's not going to just be against the Lakers on Wednesday, but he's going to do it again against the Clippers at Staples Center on Thursday.
Heavy is the head that wears the gold beaded hat. Let me tell you, I understand it completely. Yeah.
Are you ready for our next prediction?
I think so. I'm a little scared because now that I've seen the kind of accuracy that you're talking about when you gaze into the great void, that the fact that you're able to pull these kinds of things out of absolutely nowhere, I am frightened.
Well, I pull them out of the future, David. It's not out of nowhere.
I mean, to us it is.
This is more than just wins and losses. I'm not going to predict wins and losses. I'm not going to do it. Like, that stuff is easy, and if I start doing that, then we're going to have all the gamblers flocking here, and you know what? It's just not the kind of responsibility that I want to have, even though if you do want to bet, use betonline.ag. But I got to know, this is more nuanced type of things that people might not be ready to have predicted for them. So I got one last prediction for you for this week. Are you ready, David?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm looking. Russell Westbrook, Los Angeles Lakers' very own point guard, Russell Westbrook, will attempt at least 10 three-pointers against the Heat on Wednesday. That would be a season high for Westbrook, whose season high from three-point range attempts is 8 so far. But here's what Miami is going to do. There is LeBron James, good chance that he doesn't play in that game. Again, I know if he will or not, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm just telling you right now that he's dealing with some injuries. We all know that.
Thank you, Nostradumbwes.
But I will tell you that Russell Westbrook will take 10 three-pointers. And the Heat are going to bait him into those three-pointers. The Miami Heat are a switching style defense, and they do so very aggressively. And when they do go over those, they typically will go over the screens in most matchups. But against Russell Westbrook, they will not go over a single screen. In fact, they are going to go so dark. They're going to go so far under each one of these screens that Russell Westbrook uses when he tries to hero ball the Lakers into a win here in Los Angeles, that the Heat are just going to be like, you know what? Go for it. Go ahead. We're actually going to drop back a little bit because the one thing Westbrook still does have is that ability to get to the rim. And he's still got that athleticism is still there. Not quite what it was. I actually think he's taken a step back this year, but he still has enough of it to get to the basket almost at will for the most part. I think the Heat are going to be conservative with that. They're going to drop back in defense a little bit more, again, going under those screens as opposed to fighting over them like they have for most of the year. And they're going to be more than happy with Westbrook trying to shoot the Lakers into a win. I'll tell you what, I don't think it's going to work. I think the Heat are going to get exactly where they want Westbrook to be. They're just going to keep him out beyond the three-point line. They're going to force Westbrook to beat him from there, and that's not something that he does very well.
No, this is an incredible prediction. You truly have the gift, the third eye, to see into the great beyond and be able to find these incredible factoids from the future. It's amazing. It's like it's already been written in stone or something like that. We know these for a fact. I cannot wait to debate these later in the week. As far as Westbrook shooting, yeah, sure. Miami gives up a ton of three-pointers. That's just what they do. They gave up a ton to Donovan Mitchell, and he wound up taking every opportunity possible. And I think Westbrook will similarly do something against the Heat on Wednesday. So that's going to be a fun matchup. Anything else, Nostradamus, before we move on to our next segment?
No, I think it's time for Monday Madness.
Absolutely. But first, this is something that you don't need to be able to see into the great beyond for, but that's the great taste of Built Bars. Listen, look, Thanksgiving is right around the corner. I love Thanksgiving. All the good foods that you can possibly think of, a time to spend with family. And what better way to do that? If you're looking to try and save some of the calories or some of the fat from the great foods available during the holiday season, then let me suggest Built Bars. It's the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. Soft and easy to chew, 100% covered in chocolate. So many delicious flavors. Instead of getting coconut cream pie, get a coconut Built Bar instead. Again, so many different flavors to choose from. You can hand them out to family members. When your Aunt Betty comes around asking for a piece of pie, say, you know what? Try a Built Bar instead. You could probably use the cutting calories there. But you know what? Maybe don't offer that last part of it, but also recommend all the great flavors. They all taste great, but you know what? You can always save money too. If you go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, you get 15% off your next order just in time for Thanksgiving. Go to Built.com and use LOCKED15 for 15% off. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. We couldn't do the show without you, however. It's been fun to always, talk Heat basketball over the years. Your support has been so appreciated. And occasionally, like I mentioned last week, this is a new segment that we're doing where we, take the time to shout out a supporter of the show at the beginning of every third segment. A wave hello that we see you and appreciate you. Today's Heat wave goes out to Jade Jacobson, a big supporter of the show, been a Heat fan since 2003, since the Heat drafted Jerome Beasley, originally from North Dakota and eventually Seattle. Jade from Seattle used to send emails over the last couple of years. He's been listening and supporting the show from the direct opposite end of the country. Thank you so much, Jade. We really appreciate that kind of support.
Jerome Beasley.
I didn't even remember he was on the roster.
I was just looking at Basketball Reference to see if he had a nickname because I wanted to interject with some sort of contribution. He doesn't have a nickname on Basketball Reference. So what a reference by our fan there. Thank you so much for being supportive of the show, and that's why you are the weekly Heat Wave.
Absolutely. But it's also time for Monday Madness. Listen, we don't want to start off the week. We don't want to start off angrily. But at the same time, look, we build up frustrations. Just because we bring you the best Heat coverage available doesn't mean that we don't get pissed off every once in a while. And one of the things that grinds my gears is talking about putting Tyler Herro in that starting lineup. Listen, can't we just appreciate Duncan Robinson for what he does? At the same time, Tyler's not ready. He's 21 years old. No. He's leading the team's offense. He's doing everything he can off the bench. He's gone into a comfortable rhythm. Why do you have to start him? Why mess things up? Don't we trust Erik Spoelstra after 14 years running this team to know exactly where to put each player? Duncan is doing just fine. He'll come around eventually, and then we'll all forget about this ridiculous talk about starting Tyler Herro. Crazy. I like Tyler. He's a great player, and at the same time, he's in the right role for him. Absolutely. Let's leave him alone and leave Duncan Robinson alone. Wes, what are your thoughts?
Leave him alone. Leave Tyler Herro alone. This is why, if you're a Heat fan, sometimes you just can't have nice things. You got Tyler Herro, who is thriving. We're talking about 6th man of the year, most improved, all this stuff, and you're like, give him a different role. It doesn't make any, it's just not logical. Like, why would you give him a different role when he is succeeding and being so helpful to winning? I don't care if he starts. This guy is playing so well that he's closing games. You ask Tyler Herro if he cares, and he tells you he doesn't. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but he's saying it publicly, and he's delivering on that on the court. And by the way, he does say, I just want to close games when I can help my team win. And so far this season, he has been. So what do you want to do? You just want to change his role all of a sudden? I'm not saying Tyler Herro can't handle it, but just if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just leave it alone. It's working. And it's not like Duncan Robinson. His spacing still matters. You think that people are just leaving him open the way that they leave open Russell Westbrook? He still demands respect because he's a 40% career three-point shooter. And everybody knows that that shot is going to come around at some point. Just leave it alone. Everything's working. Stop trying to fix stuff that doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah, great piece by Cooper Moorhead over at Heat.com. Really highlighted a lot about what's happening with Duncan. Talked specifically about his role changing this year. Not as many dribble handoffs, certainly not as many dribble handoffs from Bam Adebayo, who's handling the ball less, of course, because of the addition of Kyle Lowry. So Duncan's role has changed. He's trying to find a little bit
more just open catch and shoot attempts, which you would think would be one of the things that makes Duncan so special is his ability to shoot on the move. But it's not as if he can only shoot while moving, right? I think.
He's again,
logically, you would expect like just a standalone catch and shoot attempt that's a clean look would be better than even coming off of a Bam Adebayo screen and handoff. But the shots are there. They're just different kinds of shots, to Cooper's point and to yours.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to eventually evolve. I think he's going to figure it out. He's just too smart, works too hard as a player. And again, as you mentioned, the gravity has to be there. Multiple defenders always tracking what Duncan does, even when he's not able to knock down the shot at more than 35%. And that's going to come around. He's going to have a few games, a few weeks where he shoots plus 40% every time. And we're going to all forget about this nonsense. But anyway, I hate to start off your week that way. Yeah.
It's going to come around in LA. Yeah, we know this.
Nostradumbwes, you're not even here, and somehow still making bold predictions.
I heard him say that earlier. I don't know where he went, but I don't know. I overheard your conversation with him.
No, I mean it's okay. We'll talk about that later on. I don't want you to be I don't want you to be subjected by anything because you've gotten the evil eye or something like that. But listen, it's a big game on Monday against the Denver Nuggets. They're struggling a little bit. Obviously, they've got some injury concerns as well. Any thoughts on the matchup against the Nuggets? Any matchup that you're particularly looking for? I think the obvious one is at center, but anything else that you think might happen? Obviously, Jimmy Butler is going to have a big game, according to a well-trusted source.
The Bam Jokic thing, man, like that's it, right? Like these are two centers from the future right now. I think you look at these next generation type centers. It's Bam, it's Jokic, and it's Joel Embiid, who's basically playing point guard for Philadelphia right now. But yeah, I mean, anytime these guys get matched up, it's going to be a lot of fun. What is going to be interesting is whether or not, because you mentioned like Bam's assists are down, he's not being as much of a playmaker anymore. Do the Heat try to involve a little bit more of that, right? And do they try to go to Bam early and often, because Jokic is as especially as he is offensively, still leaves a little bit on the table when it comes to defense. And does Bam try to exploit that the way that he basically exploited Rudy Gobert in sort of the opposite way, right?
Yeah.
I that's where I think the Heat end up going pretty early in this matchup. Of course, I think Jimmy Butler is going to have a nice night too, but I think Bam, like it's there for him. I wonder if it's going to be more of a scoring thing for him, or if they're going to him early and he starts getting other guys involved, and maybe we see him get a little competitive with Jokic from an assist playmaking type of part of his game. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, like that's part of what I'm really interested in seeing, because Bam before the season said, "Hey, I want to just keep going to something. If it's working, I'm just going to keep hammering it." If something works early on, I wonder if we see Bam do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a fun matchup. But let's see how Miami is able to handle the Mile High atmosphere. But that does it for today's episode. Of course, we'll have a full recap after that game tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching today's or listening to today's episode. Of course, let us know what you think about our new segments and anything else that we mentioned in today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever else you get podcasts. Make sure that you always listen to Locked On Heat, your first listen every day. Thank you so much to so many of you who have been doing exactly that. So now also make sure that you listen to Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 daily fantasy basketball show on the planet. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thank you so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.